Hello, everyone. My name is Sanjana Sivakumar. Thank you so much for logging on and joining us for this event. Today, the UC Davis Center for Analytics and Technology in Society will be continuing its Luminare series with a discussion on the transformation with data. Some of you may have attended our previous Luminare event on the topic of at-home entertainment. And for those of you who haven't, we have a recording of the event on our GSM website. Today's discussion will cover topics on the incredible changes with data and analytics technologies have brought in the world of decision-making in different industries. Before we begin, we would like to ask everyone to please use the Q&A chat if you wish to submit any questions to the panelists. You can also upvote questions others have posted if you want to see them answered. This will move the questions with more upvotes to the top, and those will be asked first. Please note that any questions in the normal chat will not be answered. With that, I will now hand the floor to our Center's Director, Professor Hemant Bhargava, who will be moderating today's event.
Hi, everyone. Our luminaries today are two extraordinary business leaders and entrepreneurs who are both involved in pretty amazing transformations with data and analytical technologies. It is my pleasure to introduce them and to welcome them to this event. And I hope you all enjoy this conversation. So we have with us Chet Kapoor. Chet is Chairman and CEO of DataStax. He is a proven leader and innovator in the tech industry with more than 20 years in a number of companies, including IBM, Google, BAE Systems, WebMethods, and Next. As Chairman and CEO of Apigee, he led company-wide initiatives to build Apigee into a leading technology provider to support digital transformation at enterprise customers. APIs, of course, are the modern and smart way for businesses to intercommunicate and exchange data, analytics, AI, other algorithms. And Apigee provided security, analytics, and other management services around the use of APIs. Chet successfully took Apigee public before it was acquired by Google in 2016. And at DataStax, Chet continues to help enterprises transform how they manage and get business value from data. And we will hear more about that shortly, of course. Chet earned his BS in engineering from Arizona State University. We are so pleased to have you with us, Chet.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
We also have Dr. Ed Foch, MD, who is the founder and chief executive officer of Gemini Health. Ed has over a decade's experience in the clinical practice of medicine, but for the last more than 2 decades, he has led organizations that provide internet-based healthcare applications, networks, and communication services. He has started a number of companies in the space. I think Gemini Health is his 5th, which is a health IT firm that is bringing radical change to the practice of healthcare by providing price data to US physicians and patients at the point of care, and enabling comparison shopping for medicines and other medical products. Prior to founding Gemini Health, Ed was CEO and executive chairman of PDR Network, which provided drug information and services to physicians and other US prescribers via EHR and other formats, including the iconic Physician's Desk Reference. Dr. Foch led the integration of Physician Desk Reference, PDR, drug information into dozens of electronic health record systems used by hundreds of thousands of US physicians. Before that, he was a CEO of Medem Incorporated, which created an online patient portal, which eventually was integrated into EHRs and became part of Intuit Health. And before that, he founded another health IT firm that was eventually sold to Healthion, which then merged with WebMD. So we're so delighted to have you join this conversation, Ed.
What a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. So let me start with a very broad overview question to you both. Give us a sort of 50,000-foot overview sense about what you do for a living, why should anyone care, and particularly how you and your companies are enabling transformation through data and analytics. I'll start with you, Chet.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Hemant. I joined DataStax as chairman and CEO in October 2019. I saw a massive opportunity at DataStax to build beautiful products that make users and enterprises successful. The opportunity to solve hard problems with great people while having fun is irresistible. right? Apache Cassandra was developed by Facebook and released as an open source project in 2018. And DataStax was originally founded to make Cassandra easier to run and manage with global enterprises. We all know data is the most important part, right? The most important part of any modern architecture. So today, DataStax delivers an open multi-cloud stack for modern data applications, right? We have the opportunity to meet the enterprises where they are, right? As they're going through the transformations from private cloud to public cloud, and actually help them accelerate their digital and data transformation. So we have great partnerships with 450 of the leading enterprises all over the world, like FedEx, Home Depot, T-Mobile, and so many more. So it's exciting times to be in a world where people are really looking to create modern data apps, and we have the technology to help them get there.
Great. We'll talk a lot more about that, Jen. Ed?
Great. I sort of feel like it's Beauty and the Beast, and
It is.
Jet's the beauty. And so,
I wasn't sure about that.
So our mission at Gemini is to lower drug costs by creating a competitive environment for prescription drugs. That sounds different depending on where you are in the ecosystem. If you're the federal government, you see it at a macro level. If you're the benefits manager at Chevron, you say, yeah, I got to get these drug costs down. Excuse me. But probably everyone who's listening to this session tonight has had the experience of walking up to the pharmacy counter and filling a prescription. Mm-hmm. Our goal is to answer the two questions that you never get answered now in advance. One is, what will it cost? And two is there something less expensive that would do the exact same thing? It's embarrassing, frankly, and degrading to get a pharmacist to fill a prescription because they could say it costs $1, costs $10, costs $100, costs $1,000. How do you know? And what are you going to do about it? Yeah. And so our mission as a company is to strip all that back and make it perfectly clear to you, and equally important to the doctor who writes the prescription, that here's what it will cost you, here's what it will cost in total, because every drug has two costs, what you, if you're insured, what you pay and what the employer or the payer funds. And equally important, is there something else that's equally cost effective that would, equally clinically effective that is more cost effective? So it's a very simple premise. Put price tags on everything and let the market play out, as opposed to the hide the coconut thing of healthcare, which is frankly the standard now.
So I did not have Beauty and the Beast in mind when I paired you up. I thought of it as one company that does architecture and infrastructure, and then it enables 400 other companies to do great work with data. And then what you're doing is really bringing very novel forms of data. In fact, using some of the same architecture and infrastructural technologies to put a number of things together. So if I can show a visual to our audience, to explain what you're doing, it's really you're bringing price transparency and comparison shopping to healthcare products, in this case, prescription drugs, which, if it works, will really bring the decision-making in healthcare closer to something like how we shop for everything else, including, in this case, exercise bikes, or many other things that we have been used to doing comparison shopping, like you described, for the last 20 years. So besides affecting prices of drugs, right, which is the primary goal, is to bring drug costs down through that, could you describe to us, Ed, what you think about the deeper and broader transformations that this kind of technology can cause in healthcare?
Well, so let me start with your analogy, because it works, but only goes so far. Mm-hmm. So healthcare can be described as, I want, you provide, he pays, she regulates. Now, that's the case with every drug. You can't prescribe a drug unless the FDA approves it. Most people don't pay the cost of their prescription drug. The pharmaceutical manufacturers would like to charge as much as possible, as everyone would like to do for their products and services, and the patient wants it. But unlike the exercise bikes, where we all probably think we know what we're buying, which we probably don't, but it's an illusion, most people could not tell you what the appropriate antibiotic is for Clostridium difficile.
Mhm.
And so you have this third party you're relying on called a healthcare provider. And the key is to intersect all of those regulate, pays for, provides, and desires, and line the shot up on the table. Now, if you do a really good job, I would say our goal is not to get healthcare or drug costs down. Maybe they're perfect now. I don't think so, but maybe they are. How would you know? How would anyone know? If there's no transparency, there's no competition. So we believe we will get, and we are getting prescription drug costs down by providing the transparency at the right point in the workflow. The second thing that should happen if we're effective is that if I have an expensive drug, but because it's not transparent, I've got 50% market share, now suddenly it becomes transparent and I get 10% market share, I'm not going to hold my costs still.
Yeah.
I'm going to lower my costs to meet the competition. So the first shot on the pool table is transparency in a competitive environment and getting it to the decision maker, which is typically not the patient. I'm not saying don't tell the patient, I'm saying typically not the patient, because patients cannot write nor transfer their prescription. Try moving your prescription from CVS to Walgreens without the doctor's intervention. So it's a pretty tightened up system. But anyway, so if we can move the first part, which is moving to more cost-effective drugs, what we'll see is the drugs that aren't cost-effective suddenly become cost-effective or lose market share.
But you emphasize
how an efficient marketplace should work.
Ed, you emphasize this point about that this information is delivered at the point of care, meaning, if I were as a patient given price information by myself, I wouldn't know what to do with it, right? And there are companies like GoodRx and Clinical Price Check that actually provide generic price information, but not at the point of care in the presence of a physician. But in the current climate that physicians operate in the US, what are your thoughts about what kind of transformations will have to occur within the provider organizations to allow physicians to take out time to have these cost of care conversations with patients, and also for them to get suitably trained to have such conversations?
So I'll see if I can do this without blowing up your whole thing. I have a very, very complex slide. Are you able to see it?
It should show up very soon. Yes, we are.
Yeah, well, that you can see I've got a very extensive graphics department. So normally, all you need to have an efficient market is transparency and competition.
Yep.
If there's no competition, transparency doesn't help. If you only have one drug, as there used to be for hepatitis C, and it costs $10,000 for a curative course, there's not. You can be transparent, but as soon as there's competition, you add that to transparency, you usually have an efficient market, but not in healthcare. So to answer your question, unless you bring the doctor and the motivation, along with that, you won't drop the cost. And so a lot of what we spend time on, and I was on payer calls, health plan calls today, talking about how are we going to create the construct so that the providers, and when I say provider, I mean doctors and pharmacists, PharmDs, who work at most larger health systems, including UC Davis, which is one of our live sites. Got to line up this motivation piece. Now, motivation is a question of the amount of work. So if you make the system good enough, and you intersect with what the doctor is doing anyway, and you make it just as easy to prescribe the expensive drug as the inexpensive drug, they do the right thing. They will inherently do the right thing. So part of it is motivation, financial motivation, and part of it is just intersecting the workflow in a way that that motivates the use of of competition and transparency. And I would say that generally speaking, if you look at where healthcare is going, both at a federal level with CMS or Medicare and Blue Cross Blue Shield plans, United, Aetna, Cigna, they're increasingly creating what's called ACOs, accountable care organizations, where the docs are at risk for the pharmacy spend. And all you need is a little motivation with transparency and competition. And as we've proven with some recent press releases, millions of dollars falls out the bottom, but you need all three to get the job done.
Yeah, so I guess with a lot of things, especially involving IT and transformation, you have a lot of Lego pieces that all need to come together in order for something like this to work. And that's sort of a similar question to you, Chet. You've evolved from Apigee to Google to DataStax. And where is the corporate world in this digital transformation journey that you are trying to enable and facilitate with them? Do you think they're halfway there, quarter? What role does data play? Are they ready for it? What are your thoughts?
So great question. And Ed, thank you. That's probably one of the best descriptions I've heard in a very short format of one of the biggest problems in healthcare. So that was really useful for.
What I say, beauty and the beast. Right now, the beauty's speaking.
For someone who cares deeply, because you're on the receiving end of it, you see hardened supply chains, right? And you want to change them. Those are a lot of people don't realize, right, how difficult it is to change, right? I mean, so it is great that you are very pointed on a specific thing and you're chipping away at it, right? So that's awesome. And if you had a choice between regulation and capitalism, I would take capitalism because it seems to work a lot quicker in general. So I think it seems like you're on the right path. Hemant, to answer your question, let's zoom out a bit, right? In the 2000s, the industry, solved scaling out networking and connection of billions of devices, right? I mean, there was iPhones and things like that. In 2010, it was all about computing, right? Running billions of instances of cloud apps, right? You had AWS take off, Microsoft came right after, GCP came right after. AWS is doing its reinvent starting today, and they're hugely successful. In the 2020s, we're solving the scale out problem for data, right? So it all depends on the industry you're in, and industries that are distributed and that are being disrupted are moving very quick, right? So take a good example is retail, right? They are moving extremely quickly through the process. The coal industry, on the other hand, is a little slower, right? So just to give you two extremes.
Did you say coal or did you say the school industry?
By the way, you can take education as well. It by the way, applies education. It applies to healthcare as well.
Absolutely.
Right? And it is not healthcare and financial services. You can talk about the regulation, but a lot of it is there is nothing disrupting those industries, right? Rapidly. In financial service, it's starting to happen with fintech starting to show up. In healthcare, it's starting to show up with costs, like I talked about, but also consumers like all of us saying, I want access to everything through this app, right? So a lot depends on what pressure the industry is in that determines where you are. So let me just give you an example, right, of somebody that is doing it right. And I've been working with Home Depot for a long time. Home Depot successfully launched curbside pickup in less than 30 days with Cassandra and DataStax. 30 days. By the way, we're talking about countrywide, right? That increased digital sales by 80% in Q3 and 100% in Q2, right? They launched an entire service and it works seamlessly. I've used it. It's beautiful. You get there, you say you're here, and in 3 to 5 minutes, you have whatever you ordered and you leave on, right? So how did they do it? They had a modern tech stack. They used things like Kubernetes. We gave them the ability to go fast, reliably, and make it really convenient for the developers to build these products, right? So COVID, just to one additional point, it is not how these companies have been set up. But if they've been set up correctly, then COVID actually is an accelerator, right? Because it changes their business model in a massive way. And so I was talking to the CIO at Home Depot, and his take was, Chet, it's Black Friday for us every day. right? We have Black Friday kinds of traffic happening every day for us throughout the summer. And so the fact that they were ready with a modern tech stack makes all the difference. So it is, I think every business person out there is saying, you don't have to convince me anymore that I need modern technology to survive or to accelerate. I'm just going to pour money into it. The CIOs don't have to look for money, they're getting it now. Now it's a question of how quickly can they execute.
That's really wonderful. And one of the messages I'm getting from that is that if you have good infrastructure, right, then your setup cost to do something new is actually very low, or you could experiment and you could run a lot of experiments over time. And institutions that do not have good infrastructure end up not experimenting, and then they get stuck with really old ways, and then it becomes really harder to do these kinds of changes.
Absolutely, it is. Anybody who's done this realizes you cannot do new things with old stuff, right? So you've got to create the groundwork and do the hard work and creating the modern cloud native open source stack, and so that you can accelerate your business.
All right. So now in both of your cases, as you described, there is a lot of external transformation that is required to get something going, right? All these pieces have to come together. But let me turn a little bit towards elements of your leadership style and efforts, because obviously what you're doing not only has a huge transformative potential, but it is also a team sport, right? You have to you obviously get other people to get involved and build a team that can actually carry out this vision of change and transformation. Let me start with you, Chet. What are your thoughts? How do you go about it?
This is something I'm very passionate about, and I continue to be a student, right? Because anything that you learn that you've implemented successfully or unsuccessfully, you got to continue learning. So leadership for me is all about inspired execution, right? And how do you get people to do way beyond what they believe, right? So the guiding principles for all great leaders are you have to believe, you have to inspire, and you have to execute, right? So the three words are, believe first, inspire second, and then execute. Because if you only do one or two of, you only believe and you inspire, it's nothing, right? It's just, you have to execute on it. So there was a quote I read a long time ago by Warren and James O'Toole, and it was Warren Binney, and he said, real leaders in a phase move the human heart. Real leaders in a phase move the human heart, right? And it was a great article in the Harvard Business Review. And great leaders inspire people to execute by moving their hearts and aligning them to something that's bigger than the jobs, far bigger than who they are. It's about being on a mission. So the only way I know how to drive, to drive this is to actually succeed on a mission by committing from your heart, right? And the essence of winning in a team sport, I think, comes down to three simple words: no look pass. Right? Almost all team sports have a concept of a no look pass, whether it's soccer, this, that. And I think the really awesome coaches actually know how to construct, right, a no look pass. It comes down to three things. You hire world-class leaders. You make sure they practice a lot together, right? They spend a lot of time. They know how each other smells, all that stuff. But the most important thing is they define success as the team winning, right? Because the essence of a no-look pass is somebody says, my teammate has a chance of actually dunking the ball, scoring a goal, whatever it might be, and I'm going to let them have the ball because the element of surprise helps and you have a higher probability of success. So I really do think winning as a team comes down to the no-look pass, and it doesn't matter what sport you're doing.
That's wonderful. And you dare to use medical terms such as heart in the presence of Ed. So I don't know about that. But Ed, you're obviously on a mission, right? What are your thoughts about this same issue?
Well, I agree with Chet, and I find passion and enthusiasm as contagious as depression and negative feeling. So, if you don't have that, I don't think you have, I mean, you should try to build a team if you're going to be the Debbie Downer coach, or even more importantly, you have to be passionate about it. There's a lot of things that are very difficult about healthcare, but one thing that's a great advantage that allows us to recruit relatively easily is that people love, especially people in technology, love making a difference.
Yeah.
So if you're working for a company that helps you, put a widget on a Gidget or find a better parking space, and you're at home for Thanksgiving and Aunt Ethel says, what do you do? And you say, well, I, improve some efficiency with, and then you use a bunch of multi-syllabic terms that mean nothing. You says, that's nice, pass the gravy. But if you say we're lowering drug costs for seniors, now suddenly everyone has a story. And so that's one of the rare advantages of healthcare as it relates to IT. Yeah. The industries Chet was referring to are embracing technology. Most of healthcare sees IT still as a cost, not as a source of additional revenue or efficiency. That being said, I think that, for me and my frame of reference is 5 companies for which I started. So, it starts with a few people, then you grow, and then you get up into dozens, and pretty soon you need HR, and that means it's probably time for me to leave. But it's really, for me, about people with industry expertise. And that's particularly, I suspect that's for other things, but if you don't know where the gators are in the swamp, you better have a team member who does, or you're going to meet a gator.
That's interesting.
The second thing I would say is that I think on a senior management team, it's really important to have people who disagree with you and don't think anything of it. Like, when you get together, it's not you're the CEO and they're here. It's like, and they can say, Ed, my team has a thing they call Edland. They say, Ed, that would work really well in Edland. But out here in the real world, it's not going to work the way you think it does. And sometimes they're right, sometimes I'm right, but you always benefit from pressure testing your ideas. So, I'm a great believer in that, and a corollary to that, I have to say it's incredibly rewarding to have someone who worked at you 2 companies ago contact you, say, I heard you start a new thing and I want to work for you again. I mean, that's just incredibly personally rewarding to have that experience. But, you can, technology is an enabler, but especially in healthcare and probably in other industries, your team needs to know their industry dead cold. They need to know where the problems are going to come from, and they need to be an asset, not a yes person. And so, I like people who disagree aggressively.
Well, I hope a lot of leaders are listening to you, Ed. So, Chet, let me get back to this issue of some of the technologies you talked about over time, and we've seen the role of data keep increasing every at least for the last 4 decades, one form or another. And the big challenge that has still remained with us all these 3 or 4 decades is, how do you go from data to maybe to transformation, but really to information, and ultimately to create business value from the data? And companies have struggled with that all the way from whether it was ERP technologies or getting on the internet, getting on mobile, and everything else you have now. How do you make that journey from data to real business value? And what are the challenges?
Great question. So we've all heard the term data is the new oil. But the chief digital officer at Macquarie Bank actually said something really interesting recently. He said, data is the new plutonium. Right? Extremely powerful if used correctly, but if used incorrectly, it can blow up in your face, right? So you've got to make sure you do something right with it, right? Because it's just not you have to do it right. So data continues to double every 2 years. It is a means to an end, but the key for those racing ahead is that it needs to be accessible, analyzable, and actionable. So accessible, analyzable, and actionable. Because if you just do, again, if you just do 2 out of the 3, it is not good enough. So Let me walk you through just a small example. Federal Express, right? Federal Express connects 99% of the world's GDP. They gained 50x performance over legacy systems through transforming their data architecture, right? That includes doing service implementations, being hybrid, doing things at a global scale. But the most important thing that they focused on, right? It was not just having a repository of data. They focused on what are the insights of building products like sensor-based shipping to meet the needs of a customer. So here's what I find. The ones who are really successful do one of two things. They actually make sure that they can deliver new value propositions to their existing customers. That's one, through data. But the second thing that they do is they think about coming up with new value propositions for new customers for data, because they want to expand what else they can do with them, right? So, but I think it comes down to, what is the value proposition to the customer? Because data is a means to an end, right? So making sure you use high quality data for the right place at the right time to support the best experiences for your customers. That's what matters.
Great, thanks, Jeff. So Ed, following up on that, in your case, you're bringing data to, participants in the healthcare system, either that they have not been used to working with this kind of data, or like you mentioned earlier, there could be winners or there could be losers, right? As you bring price transparency into the practice. So what are your thoughts about, does this involve building partnerships, alliances outside the firm? How do you deal with issues of maybe biases or fallacies in how people might interpret cost data because they've never really been a part of this kind of thinking in the past? What are your thoughts there?
So let me start by saying that I think of data as flour, not flowers in the field, baking.
Not plutonium.
Which, if you know how to bake, flour can make great stuff, but it can also just make a mess on the floor. Right now, data in healthcare is largely a mess on the floor. It's splattered all over the place. Some people make quite good use of data. They're mainly in the pharmaceutical and the device industry, and they have to do clinical trials, and they use the data to show the efficacy of their products and to get through phase 1, 2, and 3 FDA approvals. But most care is provided locally by docs in community practice settings, and the data is locked up in their electronic health records, and it goes exactly nowhere. The only place it's traditionally been aggregated is at the health plans, which largely have bills. They call them claims, but they're bills. The bills are incredibly inaccurate, because if a 25-year-old comes to my emergency department who's done a bunch of cocaine and has chest pain, I write rule out myocardial infarction, not cocaine overdose, because the former gets me paid and the latter doesn't. So the data is messy and it's on the floor. The fact that we have a business whose goal is to simply put price tags on things just shows you how bad things are in healthcare. So from the macro level, I'll just take one step down and say, well, everyone will tell you we should be more efficient. Healthcare should be more efficient, absolutely more efficient. Everyone goes to the rubber chicken dinners, back when they used to have rubber chicken dinners, but now they're rubber chicken Zoom meetings, and they'd say, yes, we should have more efficiency. Every efficiency is somebody's revenue model. Every bit. Chet referenced this earlier with the hardening of the line. Every time you try to do something, there's someone on the other hand pushing back, you probably won't even meet them. So you need to sort of figure out how you use data in a way you can accomplish something and overcome the combination of inertia and the negative forces. So patients, providers, and payers want drug costs to go down, but PBMs and retail pharmacies and big pharma tend to like drug costs going up. Who doesn't want to sell their stuff for more money? I know I love selling my stuff for more money. I like, and of course it's nice if you deserve it. So,
and then if I may add, Ed, you also have to work with EMR vendors who have to implement your tools inside the EMRs. And these are the same people selling their systems to hospital systems and other providers, right?
Right. And so so in my world, there's people who like drug costs up, people like drug costs down, and people who couldn't care less.
Mm-hmm.
So most EHR vendors, electronic health record system vendors, they're perfectly nice people, but if drug costs are high, low, or in the middle, they make the same amount of money.
Yeah.
So how do you motivate them? Well, you've got to figure out that they're part of the supply chain. You have to figure out how to get some money to them, some of your money to deliver your message, or you go around them. And we do both.
Mm-hmm.
We have money going back to the HR vendors to deliver our payloads, but we've also found ways to go around them because like most things, and one of the beauties of a small company is you try, fail fast, figure it out, use the data, and iterate, just like I'm sure Chet's done a bunch of times in his career. I mean, you have to do it. There's nothing like failure to motivate the next service to add on to the previous service. And so you, little by little, you start getting cost at the point of prescribing or to the pharmacist who calls the doc. And then the next thing you know, you look at the claims file and there's 10 million in savings.
Yeah.
But there's no silver bullet because there's a bunch of people shooting back at you.
Mm-hmm. All right.
What is interesting about what Ed said is, this trial and error piece, whether you're a small company, big one, you've got to make it part of your DNA, right? And make that happen because, when the book is written, it looks like the idea, Ed had the great idea 5 years ago when he started the company, it was clear shot. That is not how it works, right? I think you try.
And I'm really glad to
one takes off, right?
I'm really glad to hear you emphasize that because, for many of us, this notion of fail fast is such an easy to accept mantra that we forget that is not accepted in, delivery of things.
By the way, large companies get that way because they fail fast. I mean, the number of acquisitions and number of projects that Google and Amazon and others have tried and failed miserably at are far, like 10x more than the ones that are successful.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's how you get there.
Well, and what I find particularly interesting is I can think of at least a dozen IT firms who've said, we're going to come in and change healthcare.
Yeah.
Starting with Lou Gerstner and IBM 30 years ago, to Scott McNeely and Son, to a guy who bought one of my companies, Jim Clark, and Amazon recently. They come in with big fanfare and they go out quietly with their tail between their legs because it's a little harder than they thought. And the other thing I'd say is Mike Tyson had it right. Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And that's when the work really gets started.
It would not be good to go down Mike Tyson jokes. So we'll just leave it there.
All right.
That's my entire repertoire.
So, you just mentioned Amazon, Ed. And of course, we know Amazon has had healthcare on their agenda for several years, and more recently with the launch of Amazon Pharmacy. And then on the other side, you have things like Stay at Home, which is this, company trying to build a platform where you can see a doctor, get your prescription, do everything online over video chat. So there are a number of other changes that are coming to healthcare. Can you tell us a little bit about your views, given your 30 years of experience in this space, what you see as the future of technology in healthcare, or really, I should ask, the future of healthcare as being transformed by technology?
So I'll use your Amazon Pharmacy as an example of what won't happen. They'll be the latest group that marches in with a bunch of fanfare. If you looked at the day they made the announcement, CVS stock dropped nearly 10%. Great buying opportunity. Unfortunately, it's bounced back. So don't call your broker. You can tell how old I am when I say something like "don't call your broker." All these kids who use Robinhood that are on this are probably saying, why would you call them? And what is a broker? At any rate,
They don't call anybody yet.
No. And if you call them, they wouldn't answer.
Yeah.
So the macro trends in healthcare have everything to do with, and the data are secondary, have everything to do with lowering costs and bringing efficiency and aligning incentives. So what you see is, back when I practiced 30 years ago, I used, and I still sometimes say, the docs were cowboys and cowgirls. They're out just roping in Brandon, and they write any prescription they want, anytime they want, do whatever they want. They own the imaging center, and suddenly you get a bunch of MRIs. It was really the Wild West. What you've seen now, a little bit through regulation, but more through contracting, is that you see both Medicare and a local level aligned incentives, where the providers, particularly the docs, get paid more for keeping you healthy. At least that's the concept. It's less fee for service. So when you start saying, okay, we want to provide more services, but we don't necessarily want to just keep running, daisy chaining this and running up the bill, that's where technology can play. And as Chet pointed out, COVID has been an accelerant in a number of industries, and definitely in healthcare, particularly, for example, telemedicine. Although they're still not profitable, teledocs had a great ride. Most docs figured out how to use video conferencing to see patients because they had to. So there's been an acceleration of that. The use of data will improve because of the demand for efficiency. But as I said before, the fact that you still don't know what the cost of a service is or a drug before you get it just shows you how low down we are on the curve of using data efficiently in healthcare. So it will go up, but there'll be many failures, and there'll be more big companies that announce it. That's not what's going to occur. It will not be revolutionary. It will be evolutionary based on incentives driving the use of efficiency, and data will be a subcomponent.
And if I may ask you, Ed, so your ventures are focused, or Gemini Health in particular is focused on bringing this price transparency to drugs, right? Which is about 10% of healthcare spending. What should we expect, or do you have plans to move into that other 90%?
So the answer is yes. In fact, I was just on with one of our Blues clients today to talk about transparency in another area. But I will say that the move from pharmaceuticals to any other part of healthcare is going to be difficult. The reason I say that is pharmaceuticals are inherently a commodity. 10 milligrams of atorvastatin are 10 milligrams, whether you get it, from Amazon, which you probably won't because they don't have any contracts with anybody. That's why it was kind of an empty press release, aside from people who pay cash. But atorvastatin is atorvastatin, otherwise known as Lipitor. But if you say Dr. Chet and Dr. Ed are both cardiothoracic surgeons, and Dr. Chet costs more, well, maybe it's because Dr. Ed kills someone.
But what about laboratory tests, for instance? Are those commodities?
Yeah, they are. And so there's some that, it's interesting. Some are commodities, and then some you think are commodities, but they're not really commodities. So I actually had personal experience with an MRI that completely missed a diagnosis because it had the wrong generation of software. And so even the two MRI machines made by the same manufacturer were not the same because of the software differences. So as you get more heterogeneity in the product or service, cost transparency is only part. It's much more effective when you have something that is a commodity like drugs. The other thing is every drug has a specific code, but Dr. Chet doesn't have a code.
That's right.
So we're in the low-hanging fruit, but I think that our model can be expanded. It's just that we have a lot to do to just get our model right.
Of course, right.
So that's our
thing. Yeah. All right. Chet, what are your thoughts generally on the future of data in business? But more specifically, also, you're interested in getting enterprises to become data-driven enterprises, right? How they become one, and what's the future of this?
It's great. And it's fascinating to hear you talk about this, right? Just from a consumer point of view, it's just a very interesting problem. I'll bring it always back down to it's all data problems, right? So whether it is mismatching of software versions and things like that. So let me, Hemant, to answer your question, let me start by sharing some data, right? We've met with 1,400 leaders and practitioners across 13 geographies to understand where they were with the journey, right? We think 21% haven't started or are lagging. 46% are early and emerging. And then there are 30% who are mature and are leaders. So what is interesting is companies that have a data strategy and who have a chief data officer are 4 times more likely to have the strongest data capabilities. That's obvious, right? I mean, just because they have a person focused on it and makes a difference. Companies with consistent double-digit growth are 3x more likely to attribute 20% of their revenue, 20% of their revenue to data and analytics. It is really interesting to hear Rob Carter from FedEx talk about data. He's like, we've been a data company for 30 years.
Of course.
Because you know, Fred Smith has been very clear. It's the data around the package that is probably as important as the package itself, right? So there's a lot of revenue attribution to data and analytics that lands up happening. So what are the successful companies, right? We said 33% of the 1,400 were mature leaders. Enterprises that are making a huge difference, right? They ask the right questions to steer the organization. What data or insight do you fundamentally change the value proposition for our customers? I talked about that because it all comes down to what's the value proposition, because it's not the data by itself that matters. And then how can we deliver new value propositions? The second thing they do, so they ask the right questions that are customer focused. The second thing they do is they always embrace the modern stack. You cannot do new things with old tools, right? And the way you do that is you talk about data portability, scalability, AI readiness. You pick up things like Kubernetes, Cassandra, Kafka, all those things, all these great buzzwords. These are open source projects. They actually make a difference, right? But the most important, the third and the most important part, beyond asking the right questions, beyond figuring out the modern stack, is they align around the right business framework for differentiation, right? They define a data strategy, they break down silos, and they spend a lot of time increasing their analytical skills, because otherwise you're back to plutonium, right? You think it's oil, but it's plutonium. If you don't have the right people working on the right set of data at the right time, it's not very useful.
Right.
So it is a super interesting time to see how people are going from some people not getting started, some people emerging, and some people just taking off as their leaders.
Okay, that's really fascinating. I almost want to follow up on your point about getting people to become data analytics savvy, which is, of course, it's something managers. It's a new skill that people need to learn. And if you can quickly talk about how organizations deal with that reskilling, upskilling, I think all the way up and down the hierarchy, actually.
So I think there are 2 parts, right? It's the number of people that know how to work on data needs to exponentially increase. The way you solve that is not by having...
But it cannot be a silo. It cannot be one group that's the data savvy group, right?
Correct. So you cannot. So the point is, and you cannot hire enough data scientists, right? You just cannot. So how do you make the technology easy enough where the data scientist can create a model, but the developer can use the model in their app, right? So how do you create that? So you actually are figuring out easy ways to make the model accessible by developers, because you have millions of developers and you have thousands of data scientists, and that change will not happen a lot. So there's a technology aspect to this from what I would call the provider side. But there is from the consuming side, and this is the interesting part, the really leading edge CEOs, right? You talk to some like Ashok Vaswani from Barclays. his biggest challenge is, yes, he's got this developer and data scientist challenge with the modern stack and things like that. But his take is the business people he has, he's not convinced they're asking the right questions. Right? Because they don't know the art of the possible. They don't know what questions to ask in this new world where there's data about everything. Data is not scarce anymore. And so they are spending a lot of time on data-driven enterprises, not just bring the stack in, but how do you get people to rightly ask questions?
Yeah. And that has been my experience also in speaking with people all across in different industries that, a lot of them are getting to the point of getting data and IT ready, but they really don't know how to ask the right questions. And I hope our students are listening, because we are really trying to be there for them to become the fuel of the kinds of changes you're trying to make. I would like to turn over soon to the audience for questions, which I hope have been rolling in. So
let me just pile on, because I most of what Chet said today is above my pay grade, but this question, the issue of are we asking the right questions, let me just turn that slightly and say data and the use of data is only valuable to the extent that it solves a problem that someone recognizes and will pay for. That's what we have a shortage of in healthcare. But you really need to once you ask the right question, then you figure out what's the right data. So from my standpoint, the data is not the cost of the drugs. The data is which doctor will change which drug to a lower cost one. We have a thing, every doctor in our world is a Gemini score. That's the likelihood they'll move from drug A to lower cost drug B. And every drug has a Gemini score, which is the likelihood that it will be switched to a lower cost drug times the cost savings of that drug. And the more frequently it gets changed and the more you save from it gives you a higher Gemini score. So when you look at a whole bunch of people taking a bunch of drugs, seen by a bunch of doctors, you can take the data and say, I'm going to focus on this drug with these docs because that's when the money falls out the bottom. So the data is not actually the cost at all. That's just kind of out there. Everyone could find out what the cost is. The data is it's the measuring the activity, and then of course trying to adjust the incentives to look at the activity. So it really is key to be asking the right question. What should we be looking at and why?
Wonderful. And I hate to break up this awesome conversation, but I would love to get some questions from the audience. So I'm going to turn it over to Prerna Bajaj from the center, who's been looking at questions from the audience and will start posing them to you. Of course, I reserve the right to ask you more questions.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, hi, everybody. Thank you for the question. Thank you for this. And let's move to the Q&A session. Starting with the first question, which is, I think, for Ed. So someone's asking, even the same drug seems to work well for some and not for others, depending on which brand it is. For example, like the blood pressure medication is a case where a physician tries different brands on a patient to find which works best. So is this true in general for many drugs? Or if yes, wouldn't it harm a patient if they choose a drug based on its price, just because it's a substitute?
Yeah, so there's two ways of substitute. People think frequently of the brand and the generic, like Lipitor and atorvastatin. And generally speaking, that's the same molecule, and there's not thought to be wide variation. That said, if you look at how the FDA approves the generic, it'll allow up to 15% variation in the active ingredient. So you really could have a situation where someone says Lipitor works and atorvastatin doesn't. And the other part of any pill or tablet, there's the inactive ingredient that someone could have a reaction to. All that said, the likelihood that you will have a negative reaction from a less expensive drug is about as likely as you'll have a negative reaction from moving from an inexpensive drug to a more expensive drug. And the one that is more or less expensive is very health plan dependent. You can have a formulary where you're with Blue Cross Blue Shield and the most expensive drug is drug A, and then you move over to United and suddenly the most expensive drug is drug B. So drug costs have almost nothing to do with quality. Almost nothing. It has to do with competition, marketing. Some of the most powerful drugs out there are, aspirin and penicillin. And they're not very expensive and they're very powerful. So high cost drug and high value drug are not necessarily the same. In fact, there's drugs where you take two drugs, they're both over the counter drugs. You mix them together, you get an FDA approval, and now suddenly it's an expensive branded drug. So you need to dissociate cost from quality in healthcare as it relates to pharmaceuticals very frequently.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. And also you did touch upon how you pair the doctors with the drugs to see what's the best combination and how you could lower prices then, right? So that adds on to this.
Well, I would say that, I've never seen a situation where a doctor is going to prescribe a drug they don't believe in because they're motivated. But I mean, it's that might happen sometime, someplace, somewhere, but it would be extremely rare. Docs get paid to see patients, and prescribing drugs that don't work is generally bad for business. So they're pretty much motivated, both from a ethical standpoint and from a medical malpractice standpoint, to provide clinically effective drugs.
Thank you so much. That was super insightful. So the next question is, given the proliferation of outsourcing services and operations, what motivation or incentive is there within organizations to invest in data transformation themselves? Is there risk that large corporations with the ability to acquire service companies, IP, or control the technology itself risk transformation opportunities for smaller businesses?
God, I hope that question's for Chet.
I know, I was going to say, I'm assuming that question is for me.
Yeah, so I was going to say, please.
I was going to say, Ed, do you want to go first? Maybe we can start there. And the next time we talk about the drugs, I'll take it. So, the trend is actually changing. So I get a chance to spend a lot of time with the Fortune 500 and with CIOs and CEOs of boards. The trend is now insourcing, not outsourcing, right? And when they are outsourcing, which they are, by the way, you take a large company and they'll say 50% of the people that they have are employees, 50% that they have are contractors or consultants, but you can use either one you want. And they work across many companies, right? They'll have 3, 4, 5 providers. There'll be Accenture, there'll be a Wipro, Infosys, TCS. You pick any ones you want. But what is really interesting is they have concluded that they live in two worlds. There's a transactional world which makes their systems go, that have been hardened over the last 10, 15, 20 years. Right? And that world, they're very comfortable, actually, and I said hardened, they're very comfortable having the consultants help them improve it, make it better. Not to run them, but to improve them and make them better. But there is this new world, this new data world, which is to have modern data apps and asking the right questions and creating new value propositions. That they are not outsourcing. That they are hiring engineers and developers themselves, because what they have learned by watching the Ubers and the Airbnbs and the other companies is that you want the developer, you want the data scientist to actually know the business model and have the same intensity as every other person in the company to make it happen. So I actually think that there is this beautiful, so the Uber part is there's insourcing happening, number one. And secondly, where there is outsourcing happening, it is in a specific segment that makes a difference. And this is, and Ed said this earlier, right? There are a lot of companies, consulting companies who've come in and said, I'm going to transform healthcare, right? And my take is it your business? Or is it something that is one of your businesses? And is it something where because a consulting company's business is utilization, right? And nothing wrong with that. It's a beautiful business. They should go after it. They are not in the healthcare business. They're not a provider. They're not a payer. And so you go on and on. So I think it's an interesting mix happening on how people are trying to solve data-driven problems going forward. The augmentation and all those things happen, but I don't think they're expecting core value propositions to be solved by consultants. If that was the case, a lot of companies would be out of existence, right? And the consulting companies would be running them.
So just an add-on question to this. So what do you think how has COVID made this change? Is there any changes in the terms, in the way it's being outsourced, or is everything happening within? And what opportunities do you see open up in this time in terms of data or in the field of data?
So I think I walked through the Home Depot example, right? So when you're in an industry like Walmart, as an example, or Home Depot as an example, or Amazon as an example, it's going to be record earnings all the way through, right? Because people are not heading out there. On the other hand, you're in the hospitality industry, this is a pretty shitty time, right? There are not a lot of people going on cruises, there are not a lot of people going to hotels. So for them, there's a mega trend, right? Which is going to slow their business down. They have probably lowered the expenses they have, and COVID has actually affected them in a negative way. The interesting part is even the travel industry is not going out of business completely. They've figured out a way to get creative around it and actually to weather the storm, right? A lot of them are customers of DataStax, and we're watching them do what they do to actually weather the storm. But for the folks that it's accelerating, they have to go out to consulting companies to make it happen. But I want to be clear, not for the new modern data apps that they're trying to do, right? It is for things that have been hardened for the last 20, 30 years to make it happen. I don't think they're confused about the new stuff that they need to, that changes their business.
Okay.
Yeah, let me just say that, Chad, what you just said is essentially what we've learned. We used to outsource 4 years ago. We outsourced our development. What we found is we can't afford to have the expertise that is an investment we make in the developers, the QA people, and have that walk out the door. So it's very rare now that we outsource. We hire more people because it's an investment that we need to keep in-house.
And Ed, these are people that are on your mission. They get up in the morning thinking about your company and the value proposition they're delivering, not the next project that they're going to be on.
Yeah, or selling hourly services.
Correct.
Okay. So there's another question for Ed, which is demand in the healthcare industry is nearly perfectly inelastic. People will buy a product that keeps them alive regardless of the cost. So how does this affect the idea that competition will lower prices? I do see some thread going on here, but you could just answer it if you.
Yeah, so what I would say is that healthcare is a bizarre industry where the value that is delivered is detached from what people pay out of pocket for the most part, not just due to insurance, but when I was in medical school, which tragically was decades ago, many of the malignancies, the cancers that are now curable today, people died from. Hodgkin's lymphoma. I was working at San Francisco General when the first AIDS patients came in, and it was a death sentence. It's now a chronic disease. Now, if you add that much value, you would say, well, you ought to be able to charge a whole lot more for it. But the attitude for most taxpayers is that it shouldn't be more than X% of the GDP. Because Bernie Sanders said it should be free, or Ted Kennedy said it should be free, but somebody said it should be free, so it should be free, but it should get better every year, but it should still be free. It's a pretty tough place to have a good business model. So that is a starting point. I want everything all the time. And by the way, here's the definition of healthcare. I want these to work better. I want my butt to be smaller. I want my breasts to be larger. I want my kids to pay attention at school. There's got to be a pill for all this, or a procedure, but it still needs to be free. So healthcare.
So hard, Ed. Why? What's so hard about all that?
So we've defined healthcare as perfecting the human condition, but it should still be free. So within that environment, it's very difficult to sort of say, well, what about this and what about that? Most people can't afford out of pocket even the most basic care that would be required from a motor vehicle accident. And so it's third-party payment and insurers, and then we're back to you want it, I pay for it, he gets it. regulated, and there's this huge disconnect. So what I would say is that you're never going to be able to square that circle. The demand for perfection of the human condition, including I'd like to feel better about myself, which you're probably already thinking that's got to be a tough call. So I like to feel better about myself. That's healthcare, right? And you can't, and so the question that was posed has no answer. How do you make it possible to afford the perfection of the human condition? That's a religious question that I can't answer, despite my, years of Catholic grade school.
Okay. Though yet I would add that I think going back to the question that is, if you do have transparency and if you do have alternatives presented that work, right? The demand curve is not that inelastic that people would not act on that information. I think we're hopeful. Ed has evidence from their implementations that there's indeed some switching because of the cost information that is displayed.
Yeah, at a basic level, what you really want to know is this going to work, and is this the most cost-effective way to approach whatever my issues are? And unfortunately, in healthcare right now, you can't answer either of those questions, unless you're one of our clients, which I would recommend.
Yeah, please adopt this algorithm or whatever to your company. Yeah. Thank you so much. I hope whoever asked that question, it's answered. And so now the next question is for Chet, which is, can you give an example of how data stacks found a new value proposition for a new client? If you could provide detail on the problem the client faced and how data stacks helped solve it, and what the returns for the client were, that would help.
I think it's one that if you're not a customer of, you will over a period of time. And you've probably heard of them, right? The company is called T-Mobile, right? And so if you think about it, T-Mobile didn't use data to work on being 3% cheaper or 4% better than its competitors, right? They used data to come up with a massively differentiated approach, right? They started asking different questions, right? How do we optimize or tune the same data and tools and do it differently from other folks in the industry? How do we create a differentiated experience? So they literally, and if I can do a little inside baseball stuff, they migrated all their data and apps and warehouses from Oracle to Cassandra and DataStax, right? And unlocking the speed to drive that experience. So how did it manifest itself? They came up with T-Mo Tuesdays. They came up and said, our customers actually want ads. So instead of giving them 7 days a week, let's give it to them on 1 day a week, and let's actually change their behavior to anticipate it, right? They launched T-Mo Tuesday, added a new value proposition altogether, and now it is not just a phone they're selling something on top, right? It's not just a service. They're actually selling so much more that goes with it. And so it's a very small example of one that you can see a company like T-Mo make the transition. It's a service provider, right? It's a utility. And they've gone off and said, let's go and serve ads. It's different. The other one is one that you would expect me to say. Right? To give you another example is Netflix, right? Look at what Netflix has done. They were first serving up a lot of content. Then they learned on what you liked and what you didn't like, and they put a recommendation engine on top, right? That was great. Now they've learned a lot about what you like, and they actually give you recommendations. Then they decided that the best way to serve you is to actually come up with new content that you like. Because now they know they're watching everybody see all these different things. And so guess what? Look at the number of Netflix originals that are coming out. That is all data driven, right? And by the way, and Cassandra was a massive part of making all of that happen. And all of that started with collecting data, looking at it, and then asking the simple question. What is a better or a new value proposition that we can provide to our existing customers? So it all comes down to that. And there are many, many examples like that. Hopefully those two help.
Oh, well, that's super interesting. Never thought of it like that. Yeah, very cool. Especially the T-Mobile one. Okay, so moving on, we have a question for Ed. So for Davis students who are looking to disrupt the healthcare industry armed with the data analytics skill, what are your top 3 areas or topics that they should be aware of?
I'm sorry, I just want to make sure that there's someone who wants to disrupt healthcare, and what are the areas that are ripe for disruption?
Sorry?
I think that is the question, yes.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I thought, okay, yeah, that's the question.
There are frankly many. I think the part of that, first of all, healthcare isn't an industry, it's a bunch of cottage industries, right? If you make a pharmaceutical, you're like a heavily regulated manufacturer. If you run a hospital, it's like running a hotel. If you run a physician practice, it's like running a legal practice. So there are various ones. The people who make the best use of data in the healthcare industry is far and away, in my opinion, the pharmaceutical industry, and particularly biopharma. So if I wanted to have a big impact, I would be putting my application into Moderna or one of the mRNA companies. If you aren't familiar with mRNA, there's some good stories about it. This is revolutionary. This is turning your body into the plant that makes the vaccines. What you get with an mRNA vaccine is not the vaccine at all. It's the code for the vaccine that goes into your body, and then your own cells make the vaccine. It's pretty fascinating stuff, and it's going to move on to the creation of new drugs to treat not just communicable diseases, but all kinds of cancer and autoimmune disease. So if I wanted to, really smart, much smarter than I am, and had various skills, I would go into the healthcare industry and the pharmaceutical and the biopharmaceutical side. That's absolutely huge impact, saving lives, curing cancer. And in this case, everyone's going to get an mRNA. I mean, I won a bet because I said there'll be a vaccine this year. I made the bet in February, and it was a bet on mRNA, and I win, so I get a glass of Chardonnay from one of my neighbors who actually knows some of my neighbors. But anyway, so there you have it.
You should ask for more than a glass of Chardonnay.
Well, I also poured all my cash into stocks in February as well, because I thought the market was overreacting. So I've already been rewarded financially. So I'm happy with the Chardonnay. The second thing I would look at is actually on the payer incentive level. They really need smart data people to figure out how to tie incentives to physician behavior. And so you're seeing, really for the first time outside of the pharmaceutical industry, you're seeing health plans. I would particularly call out Optum, the sort of technology division of United Healthcare, Anthem, and some of the bigger Blue Cross Blue Shield companies have real opportunities sitting on top of tons of data. And if you can tell them, put an incentive in that works this way, and we'll monitor the data. It's never been done before. The superstructure, the infrastructure is there with ACOs, accountable care organizations, but nobody knows which buttons to push. The answer to which button to push is somewhere in their data. So I'd say that that's a really interesting place. And then the last place is our field, is cost transparency. Everyone wants to know before they go to the doctor what it's going to cost, before they have the procedure what it's going to cost, before they get the prescription what it's going to cost, and they want to know, is there something equivalent that's more cost effective? So obviously I like our space as well. So I would take those three: biopharmaceuticals, the payer industry, and then cost transparency.
So that is great advice. And Prerna, if you have a question that definitely needs asking, please let us know. I know we are at the end of our time slot, and I would hate to quit without giving Chet and Ed a chance to say some final words. So should we turn it over to them?
Sure, if you think. I just had one last question.
All right, go ahead with it.
Yeah, thank you. So actually, it's sort of, I think, a branch out of what you said, Ed. What are your thoughts on the lack of qualified data analysts with the training and expertise needed to work with big data? Do you have any ideas as to how we can bridge this gap? Should training programs within universities be tailored to specific fields? Like big data as it pertains to healthcare? And I think both you, Ed and Chet, both can answer this, but I think Ed, you can go ahead first.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think that I actually tried to start a health IT program where I went to school at Marquette University nearly 20 years ago. I said, I'll give you some money and I'll bring in CEOs, and it's going to be 100% employment. And for various reasons, if you know anything about how universities work, there's so much inertia. It's just, and I finally, after I just gave up. It's still an underserved area, and data in healthcare is very specific. You have to know things like CPT codes and NDC codes, and there's all this sort of special sauce. So I think that there's big opportunities for universities to have, at least in my field, which is healthcare IT and data around healthcare IT, and Hamant and I discussed this. If you come out with a degree in data science and healthcare, and Chet, you'll probably say you get a job no matter what, but you definitely, there's 100% employment for data scientists who understand the language of healthcare and the business model. And so I think it's just a massive opportunity for universities to step up and create that program and have wealthy graduates who make big donations back to their school.
No, I agree. By the way, there's I think where we're going, if you have data, machine learning, some development skills, right, or have one of the three, there's 100% employment chance, right? So that, and having 2 out of 3 is better, and having 3 out of 3, you are rocking, right? So the technologists will go, the deeply technical people will go what interests them. Doing models around machine learning and things like that, being a data scientist, is very different than being a developer, right? You will have to pick. You cannot say there are less of this and more of that, so I'm going to go and do this. You really should want to do it. That would be my take on the technical side. On the business side, my request to everybody that is listening is learn some of these technologies, right? I mean, this is the time, right? Go and learn R, learn a little bit of Python, learn a little bit of these technologies, because I will tell you, we as technologists, as a tech company, will solve the bridge between data scientists and developers. We will crack that code. This is what we do. This is what we do. We abstract and abstract and abstract. What we will not be able to solve is, are you asking the right questions? Right? And so the more you know about the technical side of it, the better off you will be. And it'll make you a chance to be very, very successful in your future endeavors.
Yeah, Chet, the analogy I like to make is, I remember my first job as a professor, which is also a long time ago. My dean would not use email.
Yeah.
And you would print the email to the dean, and they would dictate something, and someone else would. Now, of course, or for the last several years, understood everybody does email. And I think we've got into the point where everyone should be able to do some development and some analysis with data. And I think that's totally on point, that if you want to be a business manager tomorrow, then it's no longer sufficient to say, look, I know the business and someone else can do the analytics, the development. So, yeah. Any final words from you two?
Ed, go ahead.
Ed's far more eloquent, so I'll just go very quickly. Is the 3 quick points I want to make. One is, I think I just made this, which is, data is the new plutonium, right? You really have to use it in the right way. Be careful how you use it, whether you're a technical person or a business person. The second thing is, I think we're very early. You cannot go wrong in going off and actually going deep in the space. We are in very early days of making this transformation happen. And the third thing is, don't underestimate how the leadership aspects of making this happen, because once you come up with something that you can believe and inspire other people to do things, you will have to actually execute towards a value proposition for customers. So it brings all 3 together, right? Data is important. Tread carefully, but you'll have to bring other people along for the ride as well.
Great. So just a few last thoughts. I mean, first of all, to Chet's point, if you're on this call, you must care about data and the application of data in business. Either that or you made a mistake, you're on the wrong Zoom call. If you're on the business side, having a little bit of knowledge as it relates to technology is incredibly valuable. I went to Italy with 6 friends. No one spoke Italian. I opened up an app on the flight there. By the time I got there, I had a little bit, and I was the translator for the whole trip. So if you have a little knowledge, you can put it to work. So let's assume that you believe that and that you care about data and healthcare. I'd say there's decisions you need to make if you're young in your career. Are you a large company person or a small company person? There's opportunities either way. I don't know about large companies, so I'll say, if you're a small company person, the next thing you have to say, which part of the team are you? Are you the quarterback? Are you the coach? Are you the line blocker? You have to figure out where you are on that. And then the last thing I'd say is, you look at your decisions for your career as an investment, just like you invest your money. You are an incredibly valuable asset, and you have to decide, am I going to invest it with these people or those people? And I used to, when I met with VCs, hear them say, we invest in people, not company. And I always thought they were just sort of blowing smoke up my skirt. But that's in fact what you're going to do. You're going to decide to go with this company or that company, and it's going to be got to be based on the people, because every young company has hiccups and they have to learn, and the business plan doesn't tell you what to do when the business plan doesn't work. The people do. Yeah. So you want to invest in people you believe in, and not necessarily just in the business model, because I can tell you this about it, it's wrong.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. We could go on, but I know there must be a bottle of wine waiting for you somewhere. So on behalf of the center and our audience, I really want to thank you profusely for taking your time, sharing such great wisdom and your expertise. And for the audience, thank you for being here. I also want to thank people on the center team, Prerna, Sanjana, and Weber, who's been working behind the scenes. And we hope you all have a great evening, and thank you for joining us.